Friends, chess players, welcome back. Today we have an educational session. We will look at a couple of games and discuss some common mistakes that are often seen in games at, let's say, slightly lower or intermediate levels. I'll show you two of them. There is one mistake that, in my opinion, happens more often than others, but I'll try to comment on all of them for you. These are generally games between beginners, so we'll see a lot of mistakes, and I'll try to comment on all of them. Let's first look at this one, which is a 4 knights game. Here it is, where it's white's move, and white plays the move d3. Now, this move is not a great move because obviously it blocks our pieces. Not that it's unplayable, the position remains equal, but black here has the chance to play d5. And let's say white is a bit uncomfortable. There's no reason to keep this bishop blocked, right? For example, here, the two main variations are a d4, with white in turn being the one to take space, and the other is bishop to b5. So anyway, I bring the bishop out. I can't play bishop to c4 because there's the famous trick with knight takes e4, but in general the other moves are fine. d3 is a move that keeps the bishop inside, but this isn't the most important mistake of the game. However, since we're here, I'll comment on it for you. After d5, bishop to g5. The mistake instead is made by black. And here we come to a first pattern, especially for beginners. What problem do beginners have? That when they learn a pattern, they tend to pay too much attention to that pattern. Here, for example, there's the pinning pattern. And for example, this pattern is often connected with the knight move jumping to d5. Because for instance, here, the correct move would be to play d4 for technical and tactical reasons, which we'll see now. And after knight to d5, this famous pattern occurs with the knight and bishop, as we say, attack on the knight on f6. So here black decides not to enter this variation because evidently he's afraid of this pattern. However, this variation is perfectly playable because at worst, white will just capture this knight, but black still has time, right? To play queen to d7 and then castle long without any problems, right? So what does he do here then? Black, he plays bishop to e7. So he focuses on this pin pattern and basically forgets about everything else that's happening. So for tactical reasons, because here, after bishop takes f6, you basically end up losing a pawn. Here, white decides to capture with the pawn, that's fine, it's the same. Knight to d4, knight takes d4, okay? Knight takes d4, knight to e4, and castles. Short. Here, white basically decides to safeguard the pawn. Here, there's queen takes d5, which could be a threat, so he plays knight takes f6. In my opinion, that's reasonable. The knight was very strong. Maybe this move wasn't strictly necessary, but at least the pawn is defended. Because now, after bishop e2, rook a8, short castle, I'm ready to defend the pawn with bishop f3. At this point, rook takes c2 wasn't played. Instead, c5 was played. And here comes a small mistake, or rather, a pretty big mistake, because now these will start to add up, and we'll see them shortly. White, since he has this extra pawn, makes the mistake of all mistakes. That is, he starts thinking that by exchanging pieces, he'll win the game. This famous idea, you have an extra pawn, trade all the pieces, you'll win the endgame. I tell you this often. This is not the correct theory about exchanging pieces. Because here, white starts giving up his advantages just to exchange material. And he plays the en passant capture, which is quite a significant mistake because this pawn here is extremely strong. It's a passed pawn, supported without any problems, right? And so it was one of white's assets in this position. Making this move doesn't mean he loses anything. At the moment, though, he loses another asset, and after b takes c6, here white has a very interesting move, which is once again to place the bishop on f3. As we said before, the bishop on this diagonal is very strong, and white should have taken advantage of this diagonal. This is definitely a plus, with black always having to keep an eye on this pawn. But what does white play instead? White plays bishop. g4, the same pattern as before that keeps repeating itself. White is up a pawn, so he starts exchanging all the pieces. Bishop to g4 is completely unjustified. Why are we exchanging? A bishop that was quite active on this diagonal for a bishop that hadn't even been moved once. So even just logically, you can see that this is not a good exchange. Capture, capture, c5. The position is still excellent for white. Here, white simply needs to reduce black's assets. What is one of black's assets? Obviously control of this file. And so here, he should have, let's say, contested this file. Take a good look. The move. Rook to a1 is not an exchange of pieces, okay? It's contesting the file, so in this case, it's absolutely fine. Instead, what does white do? He starts to feel this lack of space and then goes a bit crazy, playing this move, c3, which basically makes him lose this pawn. And immediately now the position is good for black, who in my opinion makes a mistake. Look at what he does. Black in turn plays this move. c4, Black also starts to exchange material, giving up assets that were in his favor. So this pawn is weak, it's a point in Black's favor. You shouldn't remove it with the move c4. In fact, here you should start applying pressure, for example, by playing this move. Here, rook to d8, and you immediately start putting pressure on this pawn. Here, white in trouble might attack your queen. Okay, no problem. I go here, and now I attack this one, and I'm attacking this one as well. And for sure, the endgame is favorable for Black. Then there are chances for a draw, because after all, it's a heavy piece endgame, so a draw is possible. But the endgame is favorable for Black. So what does Black do instead? He immediately exchanges and plays c4. So this is an example of not being able to handle the tension. Obviously, exchange, and here, let's say generally the position has nothing left to say. They played on a bit, and basically, okay. He removed the queen, offered a draw, and they agreed to a draw. But look, even in these ways of continuing, look at what Black does. The position remains equal, of course, but look at what Black does at a certain point. At a certain point, Black starts playing moves like f5. I mean, why would you make a move like f5 and seriously weaken your king? You surely don't want to go on the attack with f4. For sure, after weakening your king, white will, let's say, have the upper hand. And in turn, what does white do? f4, he also damages his own king's position. Then they drew, and we weren't given the chance to discuss the game any further. But basically, even these little moves are moves you shouldn't make. I mean, why would you want to weaken your own king? They've got the heavy pieces in play. They've got the queens on the board. You shouldn't weaken your king for free, because maybe one day I bring my queen over, then I manage to bring my rook, and you'll be in trouble. So this game ended in a draw, as you saw, mistakes on both sides. So in the end, it's fair. But these are small mistakes that help us learn, let's say, lots of little nuances. Let's look at another game, again played between two beginners. This was already a London system with the move order starting with c3. That matters relatively little to us, e6 and c3. Bishop e7, bishop d3, kingside castling, short, knight d2. Here we have a completely standard London system. At this point, white continues with knight f3. Up to here, let's say, there's nothing at all to comment on. c5, knight e5, a classic move in the London system. And now comes Black's first thematic mistake, which I want to show you, the move c4. This move here is often a mistake. Why is it a mistake? Because we lose the pressure on the d4 square. And now you might say, well, but the pressure on d4, if I capture on d4, white recaptures with the pawn, the file opens up, the structure remains intact, and white is happy. So what's the point of this? Pawn on c5? Well, this pawn on c5 in these structures like the Cole or the London is basically a deterrent for white to play the other push, e4. Because when I push e4, obviously Black can then destroy the center. So what happens when I play c4? Aside from bishop to b1, but okay, I can understand that. Maybe I would have put it on c2 to also keep the rook active, but bishop to b1. You never know. Anyway, we'll accept that move too. Anyway, in general, what's the problem? A structural one? Because after playing c4, there's no longer any pressure on d4, and now white can play e4 whenever they want. For this reason, c4 is not a move you should play. Because now white can easily castle, can play the thematic push with a 4, and we have no way to put pressure on white's center. Black plays h6, another move. I've told you many times not to make this move. As a general rule, never push pawns on the side where your opponent is attacking. Because this pawn could one day even serve as a hook for playing g4 or g5. In fact, I have to say, I would almost consider ideas with rook to g1, then g4 or g5. I would play them calmly, even without castling much. In the end, Black has no pressure in the center, no active pieces. So what dangers are there? No problem. So here, a move like this, thanks to the fact that Black has created this very serious weakness, gains strength. So never make moves that weaken your king for free. And now, however, white makes a mistake again, the classic mistake of releasing the tension, that is, exchanging pieces when it's not necessary. Knight takes d7, in my opinion, is a mistake, a very, very bad one, because this knight is so strong. If it gets captured, I can recapture with the pawn. At this point, I remove the defender, not the rooks, so Black has trouble getting rid of this knight. But when I play knight takes d7 here, I'm basically exchanging an inactive black piece for my most active piece. And white does it, then plays bishop e5, which honestly, aside from the idea of going for the queen, c2 removes the defender. It doesn't really have any other ideas generally, so it's a serious mistake to relieve the tension for Black. He plays knight h7, let's say, tries to defend a bit, because after queen to c2, he plays f5. Okay, a defense. A bit creative, probably not the best and also not necessary, but in the end, for now, it holds. White rightly plays g4, with a guilty delay, I would say. So he tries to create the attack he should have made earlier. Bishop takes on f6, and at this point a couple of mistakes from white. Pawn takes, pawn takes. We can still accept this because the file opens up, but now comes another unforgivable mistake. Bishop takes on f6. Again, the same mistake as before. White can't maintain the tension. And let's say he continues with this series of exchanges. This bishop here is untouchable because if it's captured, let's say with a random move, if it's captured, I can recapture with the pawn. The pawn becomes a great asset, right? A passed pawn, this file opens up, and so the d5 pawn can come under attack. Of course, I can support it however I see fit. At a certain point, so bishop takes f6 is not good because, again, I exchange my strongest piece. And above all, I also bring this knight back into play for free. Knight to f3, knight to e4. Look again at white instead of playing in a sound way. A move like knight to e5, bringing the piece, let's say, to its ideal square, and then this knight can be easily removed. I move the queen away, and then I start threatening bishop takes e4 to play the position with a strong knight against a dominated bishop. But here, white goes back and plays knight to d2. He keeps trying to simplify the position at all costs. At this point, queen to h4 is played, rightly so, and here the position immediately becomes troublesome. Because now black is attacking and white tries to capture this knight. But the truth is that the other rook becomes active. And now the position is simply completely won because it's as if white is a piece down. And in the meantime, black is feasting on the position. So basically, black first brought in the bishop here. Black played very well. He brought in his pieces first and captured for free. This pawn, why not? And after that, he brought in the others. He plays the rook on f3 at a certain point, calmly though. White's position is completely blocked, so he brought his pieces to dominate the f-file and then started looking to open a new front on the queen side. He played well. Queen to g6. Maybe I wouldn't have played that, even though honestly anything wins here because white is completely blocked, so there's no reason to trade pieces. You could have easily played queen to h5 and then maybe brought up the rook to probably win the queen. Anyway, queen to g6, queen to h2. This also doesn't work because of rook to f5. Obviously now there are problems. Queen to c7. But black is just too strong here, so he simply manages to take control of the position. Let's go a bit further. Queen to h5, queen to e7, queen to f5. It's just a couple of moves, but you can see tactically, it's clear that white's fortress can't hold after rook takes on e3. Let's say the position collapses. Basically, you can't capture because there's mate, queen to f3, check. So there's not much more to add in this position, king to c2. And now black removes the last defender, rook to d1. But in short, there's nothing left to say about this position, because after queen to d3, king to d1, let's say at this point, white resigned here. Okay, he could play king to d1, but no, white resigned. Obviously, there's nothing to be done. This piece can't be captured. Black has broken into the position, white has nothing, and will be checkmated in a few moves anyway. The final part doesn't matter much to us. The more interesting part was the opening and middle game, where there are all these thematic micro errors that are good to know about, because as you can see, in my opinion, the biggest mistake is this one about exchanging pieces, which is no one really understands when to exchange pieces. On the channel, as you know, you'll find several videos on this topic, but there are also many other small micro errors that I hope with this video you can learn to avoid making. What can I say? Thank you once again for following this lesson. If you want to support this channel, subscribe, leave a like, and drop a tactical comment. And I'll see you in all the upcoming videos.